We are the Ministry of the Real Truth, and we are bringing this particular audio via this video upload because we had a comment saying that we could not prove the Bible using the Bible, or if we can rephrase it, using the biblical scriptures to prove the biblical scriptures and the Bible content. Well, we say, who say so? And we say we can and we will. So we will strive to do that, no matter how long it takes, no matter the workload, because we believe that this original, ancient, very old Apostolic Church of the East, founded by the disciple Thomas, with the help of Thaddeus, Bartholomew, and Peter, and also Mary of the 70. These were those who followed Jesus the Christ around, or Yeshua Bashika, around continually. But we have heard through another audio lecture that there was actually 72, not 70. She being one of them. And this Apostolic Church was given the original ancient Galilean manuscripts, these writings, by someone who was literate amongst the disciples during his 3-year mission. They hung out with him 24/7, 365, and they wrote down what they heard him say, what he taught them, the miracles that he apparently did. He fed the people, etc., etc. And when the church, would rather refer to it as a congregation, because there were decrees by the Romans, or the Roman authorities, that they couldn't meet in temples or churches. They would be punished for that. So they met as congregations in houses in secret, etc. When that congregation was actually burnt, Jerusalem was under attack, etc. As Jews do, they pick up their precious scrolls and they run with them. So one of these disciples picked it up and ran. He ran across different lands into different countries. This probably being Thomas, the disciple, who, because he was elected, he drew straws, and he drew the shortest straw apparently, and he was told to go to India and preach to the Indians there, the Hindus there, but he didn't want to. But he apparently saw a version of Jesus who said go and do it, tricked him into doing it apparently, and he went there. So they took these manuscripts to the original Church of the East, founded by Thomas, given to these high priests, who then hid them from the Emperor Constantine, who had this mother empirical church. He wanted that church to be number one, and everybody else had to come under it. They had to be under his authority, his boot heel. He forced his people, his soldiers, etc., to go around to different locations and seize any texts that anyone else had, or to burn them or bring them to them. And that's probably what they have in the Roman Catholic Vatican Library to this very day. They didn't want them to see it or be seen. It would be brought out and revealed. They'd be kept under lock and key. So he tried to get these from the original Apostolic Church, high priest, etc. But they supposedly hid them from him, therefore preserving them for over 2,000 years. And this is attested by the head patriarch of that church in 1957, Esai Shimun, who was unfortunately assassinated as residence, possibly in California, USA, around 1975. He was martyred, and so forth. So this native-born Aramaic translator from Mesopotamia or Bet Narain, Syria, Victor N. Alexander, translating from possibly the Western Peshitta or the Eastern Peshitta, met a high priest of the Apostolic Church. He befriended him, and he said, "What are you doing?" And he says, "Oh, I'm basically translating from this, whatever it was, the Peshitta, the Urmia Peshitta, whatever." And he says, because, for my American friends and Christians, etc. So this priest just smiled and walked away. And he came back later, he says, "What are you doing now?" And he says, "Oh, I just finished John, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and I'm working on John," something like that. And the guy said, "What for?" He said, "Why from those translations? Because they're actually wrong, we don't use those. Those are incorrect." So he got all depressed for about a year after finding out that, but he either bought or was given a copy of this Bible format of the original manuscripts from this high priest, who told him to translate that from that, because that's the originals. So he discovers a way to do that using the modern vernacular or the modern Syriac, etc., whatever he said, by taking the root words, because they're very similar to the Tarp Ashrit, the Galilean Aramaic root words, similar words, possibly same meanings. So he found this method of how to do that, and then he translated everything into the nearest English equivalent. And after getting over his depression of translating from the wrong text, he decided to work on his translation project. This is probably about 1997-98. He posted it up, and it was up there till about 2016, and it was taken down for various or numerous reasons that he's given. We're not too sure exactly which one it was. But yeah, somebody got jealous. So www.peer.com, the hostess took it down or something like that, and he can't afford it any longer because he's quite an older man now, and he's not well. He's living on Social Security, all that sort of stuff. So if you want to get hold of him, maybe help him out. Look for his email under his video on YouTube, the story of Adam and Eve. Buy the book off him. It's cheaper than getting it at Amazon. He does you a good deal. Doesn't charge you postage and handling, all that sort of stuff. He's really a nice guy, right? That's how we bought our copy of the Aramaic New Testament. We found it in a local Christian bookshop for $100. We thought, whoa, that's pretty expensive. And he says, so we asked him, well, how come it's so expensive? He says, "Oh, because nobody bothers to buy it." So I thought, well, stick that, we'll get off that Victor Alexander way cheaper, right? And he did us a good deal. And from there, we basically looked at his website, va.com, and it was up and available, and really examined it. And we kept pestering him through emails with lots and lots of questions, enough to drive the person nuts, because that's the way we are. Ask a lot of questions. But he was really, really cool. Like he'd say, well, you get some funny things off the internet about the Aramaic scriptures, and he had a little chuckle through the email correspondence, all that sort of stuff. So we tried to prod him and try to catch him out hundreds of times for a couple of years there, but we never did. And he wasn't like one that flies off the handle, "You're a pain, don't bother emailing me again, get all snotty," or that sort of stuff. He was really, really cool. He's really, really cool man. So we regard him as our mentor. We trust what he says. We did ask him, can we learn the Galilean Aramaic, etc.? He says, well, you could, but it's very, very hard for Westerners to learn it. So just trust his translation. But he wasn't saying, trust my translation, now give us $50. All that sort of stuff. He's not like that. As he said, it's not all about the money, it's about reinstalling or re-establishing that apostolic faith of the original disciples, what they heard, what they were taught, what they learnt from Yeshua Mashiach or Jesus the Christ when they spent 24/7, 365 around him during his 3-year mission. Yeah, so that's what we're bringing to you, to all. So we're not trying to pull the wool over your eyes, dupe you, give you hype, fluff, or other silly nonsense. Okay, we have policies in place. We have honesty is the best policy, and we look at we've looked at the old chivalry, and we utilise that. We do make mistakes now and again. That's what makes us human. Okay, remember Shakespeare's old line, I don't know which play it was from. They said to err is human, but to forgive is divine. So making mistakes makes you human. 100% information out there that's all perfect, wrong. Okay, there's always something they get wrong, and people can debunk it because they can, because they want to, and so they will, right? They'll refute it, okay, because you are treating on what they believe. You're exposing what they believe as false. Okay, so they get all angry at that. There's always those who try to undermine you and say, oh, no, you don't know what you're talking about. I know, I'm an expert with this sort of stuff, right? And they've never done any research in their entire life, right, in that regard. Okay, so basically we found this audio in the public domain. Okay, memories from the Holy Apostolic Catholic Assyrian Church of the East, His Greatness and Holiness, Martyr Esai Shimun, he was head patriarch, who stated, and it was up on the Messianic Jew Andrew Gabriel Roth's website, the Aramaic Scriptures.com, the Aramaic Scriptures.com for a while, but for some unknown reason, when some Take 2. Welcome. We are the ministry of the real truth, and we of late have been given or received a comment that we cannot use the Bible to prove the Bible. I'm going to put it in a different way, that you can't use the biblical scriptures to prove the biblical scriptures. We believe you can. We say, who says you can't? Because it has been done. There are YouTube videos that say, look what I did. I used the Bible to prove the Bible. Okay, there could be some that are serious, and there could be some that are just really undermining it. But it's out there, right? So we believe that we can do that. It'll take a lot of hard work, research, study, etc., but we will do it. Where there is a will, there is a way. So we found this audio in the public domain, public access. We shouldn't generate a copyright strike or anything like that. And we feel that this is probably a better audio version. We did do a video previously and it was all crackly and it's just total crap. So we listened to this one and found that it's a hell of a lot clearer than the other one. So redoing this video. This will establish that what we've been saying all along, that these disciples that hung out with Jesus 24/7, 365, amongst them someone was literate. They had the skills to read and write. They weren't just fishermen. Okay, so somebody wrote down what they heard, what they saw, what Jesus taught them, what he did, etc., etc., on leather skins or a scroll or whatever material. And when the congregation, or the house that they gathered in for their prayers, their fasting, all that sort of stuff, their teachings with Christ, got destroyed or burnt, whatever was the case, somebody picked up the scrolls, as Jews do, their precious scrolls, and they pick it up and they run with it, right? Apparently, prior to that, they'd all been sitting around and they got allocated, like, pick straws to see who goes there, who goes to Antioch, who goes to Constantinople, whatever. Teaches these people, preaches to these people the good news, all that sort of stuff. Christ was instructing them, right? And apparently Thomas drew the short straw and had to go to India, which he didn't really want to do, but he had a vision apparently of Christ later on, saying go there, do it, tricked him into it apparently. So he went there and he built these churches. There was a great response, and then he went across to China apparently, or his adherents went on to China, to Japan and Central Asia, etc., preaching the good news. He was martyred in India by jealous Brahmins. They chased him, cornered him at this big rock somewhere and ran a spear through him, right? So he's martyred. This is basically proof that he founded the original Apostolic Church of the East, along with the help of Bartholomew, Peter, Thaddeus, and Mary of the 70. These are it's actually 72, that followed the Christ around, and then them around wherever they went. So he founded this church. He gave these writings of what Christ said, what they'd heard, what Christ said, what he did, etc., to these high priests of that particular church. But Emperor Constantine at the time claimed to be a Christian when he was really a pagan Christian, and he wanted his church, his imperial Roman Catholic Church, Roman State Church, to be the mother church, the number one. So anyone else was inferior, but he did give them the option possibly to come under that particular church, be adherents of that particular church, under their authority, under his boot heel. So he sends the soldiers out to different areas, probably to the Waldeans, etc., threatens them, they threaten them, convert or die, renounce your belief, give us all your texts or burn them, or else we'll put you to the sword or burn you along with them, all that sort of stuff, right? Some refused, some weakened, because it's a natural instinct. Who wants to die? Nobody wants to die, they want to live on, so you're going to do that so you can live on, right? Okay. So they probably took a lot of their texts, and that's probably what, if you could get into the Vatican library, you'd probably find a lot of them in there, right? They locked them away, never to see daylight again, right? All this sort of stuff. Keep them under wraps, keep them under lock and key. Even though some today may have access to it, and, oh, look what I found, and reveal it to the world. Okay, so basically it's an audio to prove that Thomas existed, that those disciples existed, that the Christ existed, obviously, for them to write it down. Okay, there's always that possibility that someone will say, there's always that possibility that they made it up, it's all mythical, or this sort of stuff. Prove it. Because we've just proved it. Okay? If there's original manuscripts given to this Church of the East, and this particular Patriarch 8 in 1957, Esai Shimun, testified, he's a testator, right, that these were handed over to the high priest of that church. Okay, he's probably had them in front of him, right, to verify that fact that they are actually there, they are actually real. Okay, you can contact another priest, apparently. We found this under a comment underneath Victor N. Alexander's video on YouTube, the story of Adam and Eve. You'd have to look for that, and then find his email, and because he said you could basically contact this priest or this patriarch of this church, Abram, and maybe he'll give you a free tour, right? Have a look at them, but maybe you can't touch them because they say, precious, whatever, right? And he'll show you, here they are, to verify, they actually are what they claim to be. Okay? Don't know, or can't guarantee if either Victor and Alexander or this priest of that church will reply to your email or whatever, right? But at least give it a try. So anyway, this is that audio, and this is better quality. So this basically verifies that all these people existed, that these manuscripts actually exist, and they're in the hands of this Martyred or the Apostolic Church of the East. You just have to try and contact them somehow, as we suggested, to actually have a look, if that's what you want to do. If you ask us, well, we want to know if they're real, how do we get to see them before we can believe that they're actually there? We need to see them. Well, that's the steps we suggest that you do to be able to go and see with your own eyes that these manuscripts actually exist, that these people that wrote it down, these disciples, this Christ, actually existed. Okay, so let's listen to this audio.
Memories from the Holy Apostolic Catholic Assyrian Church of the East. His Greatness and Holiness Martyred Eshai Shimun, Catholicos Patriarch. 53 years of dedication toward his people, Church and Assyrian nation. Wednesday, February 26, 1908. 2. Thursday, November 6, 1975. Khoshaba, Hakkari, Turkey. San Jose, California, United States of America. A short biography. Head of the Church. His Holiness Eshai Shimun XXIII was the Catholicos Patriarch of the Church of the East. As such, he was the supreme head of the Church and its universal pastor. The official name of the Church of the East is the Holy Apostolic Catholic Assyrian Church of the East. It was founded by the Apostles, St. Peter, St. Thomas, St. Thaddeus, St. Bartholomew and St. Mary of the 70. His Holiness, Eshai Shimun was the 119th Patriarch in this glorious line. It may also be noted that the Church of the East is called different names by various historians. Some of the popular appellations are Assyrian Church, Nestorian Church, Chaldean Syrian Church, etc. Patriarchal seat. Originally, the headquarters of the Patriarch was Babylon on the river Tigris. Afterwards, Babylon came to be called Seleucia-Tezepon, and it was the capital of the Persian Empire for a time. Later on, when Baghdad was made the capital of the Arab Empire and the seat of the Caliphate, the patriarchal seat was also moved to Baghdad, where it remained till the invasion of the Mongols. In the period of confusion and disorder that followed, the Patriarchate had to be shifted from place to place till it was set up at Mosul. Still later, it was moved to Khoshaba in northern Assyria. The unhappy events of the First World War again necessitated a transfer of the patriarchal seat. In 1940, the Patriarch went to the United States of America and finally established his headquarters there at San Francisco. Birth and parentage. His Holiness was born on Wednesday, February 26, 1908 at Khoshaba in Hakkari of the Turkish Empire. Hakkari is a highly mountainous region in the borderland where modern Turkey, Iraq, and Iran meet. The Rab Khala David Dimar Shimun was the father of His Holiness. As he was the commander of the Assyrian armies during the First World War, he came to be popularly known among the Assyrians as the Rab Khala. He was the brother of two former patriarchs, Mar Benjamin and Mer Paulos, that is commanding general. At the time of the disturbances in 1933 in Iraq, the patriarch's father, the Rab Khala, his mother, Lady Esther Bet Matran, his aunt, Lady Surma, and the rest of the patriarchal family were taken to Cyprus. They had to remain there for a long time. At last, in 1949, the Rab Khala and Lady Helen, the patriarch's sister, came to the United States of America. Honorable Theodoros Dimar Shimun and Honorable Captain Zagam Dimar Shimun were brothers of the patriarch. The members of the patriarchal family had settled in the United States thanks to a private bill was passed by Congress permitting their entrance into the United States of America on a non-quota basis. Education. From his infancy, His Holiness was brought up with care. The necessary theological and liturgical training was given by the late Archdeacon of the Patriarch, Very Reverend Thama Ishida, and by the Metropolitan of Rustica, His Grace, Mar Yosef Benisho. His education was not completed when, at the age of 12, he became Patriarch in 1920. 4 years later, for further education, the Patriarch went to England and was enrolled at St. Augustine's College, Canterbury. After completing his preparatory schooling there, he went to Westcott House, Cambridge University, where he specialized in history and statecraft. His formal schooling under formal teachers ended in 1927, but in the next 2 decades, his education in the harder school of adversity has mellowed his wisdom and matured his personality. Experience is always a great teacher, and what a life of rich and varied experience His Holiness spent, especially during the 2 decades from 1927 to 1947. He was on the move in Iraq, Cyprus, England, Switzerland, and the United States, often in danger of life during the days of the disturbances in Iraq, meeting foreign diplomats and heads of states, making representations to the League of Nations, making appeals to the United Nations, and contacting world leaders and discussing with them the Assyrian questions. His Holiness did everything possible to save the hapless Assyrians in the beloved Church of the East from utter destruction and disintegration. And the sober serenity visible on his radiant face today is the accumulated result of these myriad experiences. In 1953, when His Holiness visited England, the Manchester Guardian reported, "The Patriarch, an imposing man with the coal-black hair, handsome profile, and perching black eyes of his race, wore black robes and a cross." The Church of the East traces its origin directly back to the original apostles. One of its chapels, founded by the 3 wise men on their return from Bethlehem, is still in use today in the town of Esai, in northern Iran. The Patriarch attended that chapel as a boy. Consecration. In the year 1920 began the term of office of the previous Patriarch. For the past 600 years, by virtue of a law passed by the Church, the Patriarchate has been hereditary in Mar Shimun's family. This is the only hereditary Patriarchate in Christendom. As the Patriarch remains celibate, the succession goes from uncle to nephew. On the death of the Patriarch, the bishops, along with the chief metropolitan, meet in council and elect a successor to the patriarchal see. The years preceding the consecration of Mar Eshai XXIII were full of tragedy for the Assyrian people. Patriarch Mar Benjamin of hallowed memory was treacherously slaughtered along with several Assyrian national leaders in the fateful year of 1918 by the Kurdish chieftain Simco again. This conference the Patriarch attended much against his better judgment, at the urging of Captain Gracie of the British political mission in the Caucasus, accompanied by Mr. Robert McDowell, son of Dr. McDowell, a Presbyterian American missionary who had spent many years among the Assyrians of Iran as a member of the Presbyterian mission, and who had told the Patriarch that unless he was to meet in conference with Simcoe, the Assyrian nation would not be considered an ally at the conclusion of the conflict, then clearly predicting an Allied victory. This advice, whatever its intention, proved fatal not only for the Patriarch but for the Assyrian nation as a whole. Mar Paulos, the brother of Mar Benjamin, was raised to the Patriarchate then. He, too, died of illness on the terrible flight following the murder of Assyrians in Kurdistan. At that time, in the patriarchal family, there were only 2 eligible candidates for the post, Theodoros and Eshai, who was then a lad of only 12. The choice fell upon Eshai. So, Eshai was raised through all the minor grades of the hierarchy and, on Sunday, June 20th, 1920, at the Church of Mount Miriam, in the Bakuba camps near Baghdad, he was consecrated as the Catholicos Patriarch of the Church of the East, the 119th Patriarch in unbroken apostolic succession, beginning with Mar Shimun Kappa, St. Peter, who first established the Church at Babylon. 50 years a Patriarch. The previous Patriarch has been in this exalted office for 50 years, thus, with the exception of 2 former Patriarchs, viz., Papa Bargaji, who sat upon the patriarchal see from the year 247 to 326, and Mar Eliashim XII, also from the present line of patriarchal house, who sat from the year 1600 to 1653. His Holiness, the former Patriarch, is the third in this long line of apostolic succession of nearly 2,000 years' history to have ruled the longest on this holy see. The first stage from 1920 to 1927 witnesses the minority of the Patriarch and his education abroad. Though the Patriarch was consecrated at the early age of 12, the young Patriarch received all the honors due to his rank. Each diocese led by its bishop paid him homage. The boy Patriarch was given intensive theological training and general education befitting his rank. These days were days of stress and strain for the Assyrians, who had been drawn into the world conflict by the Western Allied powers, namely Great Britain, Russia, the United States and France, in a decision reached by the representatives of those powers during a conference held in Tiflis, Russia in 1914. The victory having been achieved by the Allies, and in which the small Assyrian first Christian nation had played such a prominent part in the Middle East theater of war, as witnessed by the Allied in general and the British in particular, whom the Assyrians served with distinction in the years succeeding the First World War and during the Second World War, now conveniently forgot all their promises and sacrificed the Assyrians on the altar of oil. These were the years of intrigues and murders, of rebellions and flights. The affairs of the Assyrian people and their mother church were managed by Mar Yosef Nanisho, as Metropolitan of Rustica, consecrator of the Patriarch, according to the canon law, and for a period, assisted by the late Martin Matthias, Metropolitan of India. In secular affairs, these two metropolitans were assisted by Lady Sir D. Mar Shimun, and her brother, Rab Kala, General David D. Mar Shimun, father of the Patriarch. The second stage began with the return of the Patriarch to his headquarters in Iraq in 1927, and it lasted for 2 decades. They were hectic days of feverish activity for obtaining a national home for the Assyrians. After the First World War, the Turkish Empire broke up. Syria, afterwards divided into Syria and Lebanon, Palestine, afterwards Israel and part of Jordan, Iraq, Old Mesopotamia, and Arabia were lost by the Turkish Sultan. In Turkey itself there was a revolution under the leadership of Kemal Pasha, who abolished the Sultanate and Caliphate in Turkey. The Western powers were obliged to recognize the Republic of Turkey and make peace with Kemal Pasha. Syria became a mandatory territory under the French, Palestine and Iraq under the British. Arabia split into a number of independent or semi-independent kingdoms and chiefdoms under the British sphere of influence. In the settlement that followed the First World War, the Assyrians were nowhere in the picture. They found themselves at the mercy of the newly formed governments of the Middle East. There were persecutions and rebellions and suppressions and flights. The Patriarch and his family were deported from Iraq to Cyprus in 1933 under the control of the British Foreign Office. The Patriarch was not allowed to meet with the Assyrian leaders and bishops. So, it was a period of hard days for the Assyrians in the Church of the East. However, the Patriarch was permitted to visit England and to go to Geneva to place the Assyrian case before the League of Nations. Those attempts were not successful, since the League of Nations, as is well known, was only an instrument to safeguard the interests of the big powers and the British government, which was determined to keep the Assyrians in Iraq for its own interests and had the ability to nullify any plan aimed at the betterment of the situation of Assyrians in Iraq or their immigration to some outside country. In 1940, His Holiness came to the United States of America to supervise the affairs of the Church of the East in this country. He was then able to present the Assyrian question before the World Security Conference held in San Francisco in 1945 and before the United Nations Organization in 1947. From 1948 begins the third stage of the previous Patriarch's term of office. In this year, His Holiness made epoch-making announcements of a new policy for the Assyrian people and the Church of the East. He directly contacted the embassies of the Middle East countries in Washington and at the United Nations headquarters and broke down the wall of suspicion and misunderstanding. He advised the Assyrians and members of the Church of the East all over the world to remain as loyal and faithful citizens of the states in which they lived. The result was electric. There was friendly response from Syria, Lebanon, and Iran, and cordial relations were established with these governments. Ever since his arrival in the United States, His Holiness has been active in establishing parishes, building churches, editing and translating literature from Aramaic into English for the use of the Church in this and other countries. During this period, the Patriarch has consecrated several bishops, ordained many priests and deacons, and, 3 years ago, established the first non-Assyrian American English-speaking parish in Seattle, Washington. Perhaps the most important of His Holiness' activities has been the apostolic pastoral visits which he has paid to the churches in India and the Middle East, and which have resulted in the strengthening of the spirit of the clergy and the faithful. the erection of many edifices, building of schools and, finally, the establishment of a seminary in Tehran, Iran, and the actual construction of a handsome building for that purpose were among his achievements. In 1954, for reasons of health, the see was removed from Chicago, Illinois to San Francisco, California. The Cathedral Church of the Patriarchal See was the Church of Martyred in San Francisco, California. Scholar and writer. His Holiness was a profound scholar, a good writer and a fine speaker. As early as 1926, the Patriarch attended the Nicene Council commemoration held at Westminster Abbey, London. The Church and State Conference held in Oxford and the Faith and Order Conference held in Edinburgh were both attended by His Holiness in 1937. The Distinguished Athenaeum Club of London had honored His Holiness by conferring on him its honorary membership. He is also a member of the American Historical Society and other organizations, and represents the Church of the East on the World Council of Churches. Many appeals and publications concerning the Assyrian question, written by the late Patriarch and presented to the British government and various international bodies, mark him out as a writer of reputation. Many Syriac books have been translated into English by the Patriarch. Portions of the Aramaic liturgy, the Book of Hymns and Praises, Synodical Rules of the Church of the East, the Book of Maranatha, a standard theological work of the Church of the East, several outstanding sermons on the history of doctrinal of the Church of the East, the publication of the homilies of Martyred, the great saint and scholar of the 5th century, in 2 volumes, numbering more than 1,400 pages, along with 70 pages of introduction and critical apparatus in English by His Holiness were some of them. His Holiness was well versed in ecclesiastical history and an authority on history of Christianity in the Middle East and Far East. His scholarly discourses on church history at international ecclesiastical conferences at various universities had attracted worldwide attention. Thus, a banquet was given on a most historic occasion in the great city of Chicago, but though it was sponsored by all the parishes in the United States of America, in reality it was done by the Church of the East throughout the world. It is therefore a reminder to us not only of the 50th anniversary of His Holiness's consecration in the unbroken line of apostolic succession, but also of all the aspects of the glorious history of the unparalleled missionary enterprise of the martyrs and confessors, of saints and scholars, indeed of the first Christian nation, to whom every Assyrian, irrespective of his present church or denominational adherence, owes his history and only through which he was known to the civilized world. Conclusion. It is with a sense of profound humility that we stand today before this glorious history in which His Holiness, the former Patriarch, Eshai Shimun XXIII, had played such an important part, and we pray that the Triune God, who was revealed to us in His fullness by the dispensation of His only Son, our Lord Savior Maran Ishomshika, the Lord and Master of the Church, be with and guide this, His Apostle, to administer and lead His holy Church for many years to come, and to the glory of His holy name. Amen. Compiled by Asher Cherry. Toronto, Canada. Friday, December 31st, 2010.